Can I just say welcome, firstly, to everyone here? This is an event run by Reunite Families. My name is Dr. Simon Ofer. I'm a family doctor, and I'm an MP for Stroud. And I got particularly involved with this because of a person called Rebecca Gray, who unfortunately can't be here today. But my daughter actually went to school with Rebecca in the same year, and I became aware of her plight when I was campaigning to be the Labour MP. And I suddenly realised that there's a whole load of people who are being subjugated to these really quite toxic rules which are breaking up families. And I think this is the one thing that's really central. This is all about families, and it's incredibly important. And what Rebecca did was a ridiculous thing. She fell in love with someone who wasn't English. Now, how ridiculous is that? And she's been made to suffer for that for a number of years because of this minimum income requirement. And so this is what this event is about. It's about reviewing that and seeing how we can help so many families across the country, actually. It's a very important time. We've had a recommendation from the Migratory Advice, and what they're saying is that they're not suggesting any minimum income requirement at the moment. So it's sort of up to us a little bit. We've got a slightly blank canvas. And they're looking as though they're recommending something between about 20 and 28,000 pounds in terms of the minimum income that's required. Possibly something like 23 grand was suggested, but this is all up for grabs essentially. So it's really, really important that we do get involved with this. So I won't say very much because we've got the real experts here, but what I'd like to say is that this is about families, and families are absolutely key to our health, to our well-being, to the wealth of the country. And this particular set of regulations is splitting up families and not enabling them to live together. And this has particular effects on women, actually, because women tend to earn less in the workplace, so that any minimum income requirement is much, much more stringent on women. And also, of course, it affects children. And it's really, really important that these are the future of our country. We must look after them in a much more coherent and a better way. Now, as you know, some of this came in 2012 as part of a sort of toxic environment that they were creating. And I think it's really, really important that we try and change that narrative of it and be more supportive, particularly to the families and visas associated with that. So I'm not going to go on for very long because I want to get the experts involved in this. But what I would say is we may have some MPs coming and going. And that's what happens with MPs. They get waylaid and then they have to go off somewhere else. I have to go somewhere at 25 past 2 because I'm going to ask you a question in the chamber, but then I will come back and we're going to go to, there's an exhibition on in the main part of Parliament which we can all go up to a bit later, and that's on till Thursday, and I'll make sure that as many MPs as possible go to that. Today is something called a one-line whip, which means that MPs don't have to be here to vote for in terms of government legislation and stuff, so there will be less MPs there, but I'll make sure that they know about the exhibition, and almost all of them will pass through that chamber as well, so they'll have lots of exposure to that. So all I would say is this type of legislation with visas for spouses and stuff will affect net migration from between 1 to 3%. So it's a really tiny amount in terms of the overall numbers, but it has an absolutely enormous effect on those families involved. So I'm really going to campaign strongly to try and reduce it. We could get rid of it entirely, or we could reduce it to a very minimum level. So let's all campaign on that, and I'll encourage other MPs to do so. So thank you for coming. I'm going to hand you now to the real experts here. So.
Thank you very much, Simon. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's taken time to come here today and to hear what we've got to say. We've had some members who are here who have come from all over the UK, so really thank you so much for taking the time and really putting in that effort. It means an awful lot. So you are the ones who are affected by these policies, and MPs really need to listen to you all. And we've also had the privilege of being able to go down and speak with some of our members this morning and personally hand in the reports and the briefing. So thank you to those who did that. I hope it was a very enjoyable experience. But first of all, my name's Carolyn Coombs. I'm co-founder of Reunite Families UK. I set it up as a Facebook group with another mum, Jane Yilmaz, because we were both affected and we just thought we're not alone. There's got to be plenty of other people who are affected. And we started very early on campaigning as an organisation. And in 2022, we finally became a non-profit organisation, which I'm very proud of. And we have nearly 6,000 members who are part of a private community and many more who don't actually know we exist. And we'd really like people to find us and find this wonderful, supportive, safe space where they can share their experiences and help us amplify their voices. And we know through our lived experience just how really devastating these rules are. And I can't tell you enough how awful they are. And we knew very early on through personal experience, but we also knew we needed to evidence it. And so it's been our mission to do that. And thanks to Poor Handling Foundation in 2022, they funded us to be able to do some vital research, which now is very pivotal time, couldn't be more timely. And that will enable us to provide even more evidence on the impacts to the people who make the decisions, such as the Home Secretary. And so it goes out saying, please, I urge you to listen to what is being spoken about on the panel and really hear these very real life experiences. And fundamentally, like any of you here, people just want to be a family in this country and start a family in this country. So thank you very much.
If you thought you could fall in love with whoever you choose, think again. Because in the UK, there is a huge price tag on love. Did you know only 50% of people in the UK would earn enough to live with a partner born overseas? In fact, a British or settled person must earn £29,000 or have £88,500 in savings to sponsor their partner to be in the UK, whose income doesn't count. 42% of men and 64% of women working in the UK don't earn £29,000. The whole spouse and partner visa process is extremely complex and prohibitively expensive. Most couples face long-term separation whilst they apply, whilst others are forced to choose exile to stay together. Separation has an enormous impact on families with children. Women, people living outside London and the South East, young people, older people, carers, and those with additional support needs also face challenges meeting the requirements. The mental health impact on everyone involved is significant. 2025 is a critical year as the government will be making a decision on the minimum income threshold, which will make or break many thousands of couples and families. If you'd like to know more, visit our website at www.reunitefamiliesuk.co.uk and ask your MP to stand up for families.
Hi everyone, my name is Tamsin Kumis and I've been leading the research project for Reunite Families over the past few years. Looking into the impact of the spouse and partner migration rules. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone who took part in our research. So many of you have faced great suffering because of the rules, because of this system, and your encounters with these rules have had lifelong impact. Through sharing your testimony with us, you joined us in our mission to shape a system which is fairer, one which makes sense, and one which protects us. And that took real courage, so thank you. I've been changed by the experience of hearing all of your testimonies. They've been incredibly moving, and I've been changed by it. And we've been heard, and we're being heard, so well done. Thank you to all the MPs, the researchers and policymakers who are here today. Thank you to Yvette Cooper for commissioning the review. And we felt truly listened to by the Migration Advisory Committee. So that's been great. So about our research. So we started in late 2022 and we were funded by the Poor Handling Foundation. We began looking at the impact on children in particular, and then later we broadened our focus. We ran focus groups, we commissioned Quorum to work with us to speak to children. And in summer of 2024, we ran a survey with over 750 people. This was the largest data set of its kind, and this was really just the tip of the iceberg. We know that there's so many more people who are impacted by these rules who we haven't heard from and who the Migration Advisory Committee haven't heard from. So who did we hear from? We heard from people who have applied, who want to apply but aren't able to, who hope to apply in the future, and people who have chosen not to apply. And we heard from a few family members as well. We mostly heard from sponsoring partners who were primarily white British citizens. Most people were married and in long-term relationships, averaging 7.5 years. And the largest groups of joining partners were from America and Turkey. We know that there's a bias in our data, so we mostly heard from sponsoring partners who are white British citizens, but we decided to speak to caseworkers from the Refugee and Migrant Centre in the West Midlands to understand better the experience of migrant sponsoring partners. But more research is needed into the experiences of non-white British citizens as sponsoring partners. And what did we find? So as the animation explained, lots of people experience long-term separation, exile, and great financial pressure because of the rules. Because of these changes of conditions, people experience a deterioration in their mental health and in their sense of belonging. 78% of people experience a deterioration to their sense of belonging because of these changes of conditions. And 80% of families reported that the adults experienced a deterioration to their mental health. Lots of people also reported a deterioration to their ability or capacity to work, to contribute to the community, and to invest in a future in the UK. And how do people find themselves in this situation? So many British people go abroad to work or to study, and then fall in love, get married, start a family, and then later wish to return home to settle. Some for health reasons, some to care for their parents. Other people wish to be near loved ones or to be here for work, for employment, for quality of life, for the education of children. And then many people are really shocked to find out how hard it is. Most people don't know that these restrictions even exist, often until after they've had children. There's very poor public awareness around these rules. Beyond this, the application is very difficult and the rules are highly restrictive. So most people here probably know a bit about the rules, but I'll give a very brief explainer. So the sponsoring partner, as we've heard, must earn £29,000, and they must work in this role for 6 months before they can apply, unless they have £88,500 in savings, which most people don't. The joining partner's income is not included, not considered. This means that assuming you get a job almost immediately on arrival back to the UK, you're likely to be separated for around 8 months from your partner. And if you have a family, that's a very long amount of time. Even if you don't have a family as a couple, 8 months is very long. 50% of the UK's working population don't earn £29,000. As we've heard in the video, 64% of women, 42% of working men in the UK. Also many public sector workers, many home office staff as well. So for those couples who don't earn the threshold, separation can be long-term, even longer term, or indefinite, and some choose exile to stay together. For families with children, separation means enforced single parenthood, paying for 2 households, children growing up without a parent. There's much existing literature on the impact of separation from a parent on children. We found in our research that children are experiencing separation anxiety, depression, behavioural changes, and Mia from Quorum will talk more about this later. And the pressure of the financial threshold, as Simon said, is particularly great on enforced single parents who are caring for children whilst trying to work full-time without the support of their partner. This situation is all too common, and it's more often, as Simon said, British and settled mothers who are in this situation because they're more likely to have the children in instances of separation. Perhaps the rules seem to have been designed for childless British men. In these instances, kids lose out most, losing their mother to work, losing one parent to work in financial stress and their other parent overseas. But it's not only about the financial threshold. Our research found that the visa fees were reported to be a barrier by just as many people, almost as many people, as the financial threshold. For the average couple on a 5-year route without legal advice, they're likely to pay around between £11,000 and £12,000, and that's before paying for citizenship over 5 years. And for those on the 10-year route, it's twice the amount of time in precarity, and a lot more money. Our research and other research, including that from the Institute of Public Policy Research, found that the 10-year route leads to great precarity and distress for those on it. And we welcome the Migration Advisory Committee's suggestion of a review of the 10-year route. Issues with these rules have been being raised for many years now. Concerns around the rules were heard by the Supreme Court in 2017. And whilst the previous threshold was deemed lawful, the Supreme Court that the rules did not protect the best interests of children. So the exceptional circumstances route was introduced, that's the 10-year route. And this route is very inaccessible. Lots of people apply and then are refused, and then later they're granted it in court, which shows that this route doesn't work. So 8 years on, children are still being separated from their parent. There's still very limited understanding of what exceptional circumstances even means, what is deemed exceptional. So our children are still not being protected by this route. We heard that people with caring responsibilities face additional challenges in meeting the threshold and securing a visa. They are more likely to face even longer term separation. Families where there's someone in the family with additional support needs, separation has an even more significant impact on these families. Children need both their parents, and the parents need each other's support more than ever. We heard how women have had to give birth alone without the support of their partner. How some children have never met their fathers. How some couples are unable to access fertility treatment or to foster or adopt because of the rules. How many families have had to give up hope of ever having a family together. How some people can never return to the UK if they want to be together. How grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, other family members are also impacted by the separation. How people have had to make impossible choices between partners and ill parents, between safety or togetherness, between healthcare and love. How EU citizens have struggled to adapt, many not realising that they too are subject to these rules since Brexit. How those in conflict zones are unable to access test centres for their English language tests and biometric registration centres, leaving them in danger. How partners from certain countries are refused visit visas to spend time with their families. How children are lonely and grieving, but their parent wants to be here with them. How LGBT applicants struggle to evidence their relationship, particularly if it had to be secret overseas. Our research found that people are sad, hurt, and angry. They feel betrayed by a system that they've contributed to. Diverse, binational, and low-income families are being penalised by the rules. And not only do these rules come at a great personal cost to those navigating them, but they also come at cost to society and to the state. The indirect consequences of the rules goes against government policy. Counterintuitively, our research found that the rules lead to a reliance on the system. People become reliant on the NHS because of the mental health impact. They can't cope without the absence of their loved ones and the long-term stress and the uncertainty created. People are less able to work due to the pressure on their mental health. Others are pushed onto benefits, especially single-parent households. Among families who reported an increased financial pressure in our survey, 19% reported relying on state benefits because of the separation from their partner. It's quite a significant number. And this was not what the system was designed to do. Our conclusions and recommendations are in our report, which you can find here. And you'll hear from my colleague Matteo more about the Migration Advisory Committee's review. Most importantly, we call for children's best interests to be meaningfully considered. We say no to Skype parenting. We say yes to a parental route to avoid separation between children and parents. Finally, and most importantly from our research, we heard that love is what gives life meaning. That when the possibility to be with those who you love is taken away from you, people lose hope, people lose motivation, people lose their sense of belonging. People have described their life as being over once they were separated from their loved ones. As the MAC review said, family life has inherent value. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the members. Thank you for contributing. Thank you for being here.
When I go to bed at night and I feel the sadness come, I imagine Daddy's here with me, holding me in his arms. Last time I got to see him, he taught me how to fly through the skies to be with him when I close my eyes. One day, I hope my dreams come true. We can all be together again. Something I can't imagine. I'll dream and dream till then.
Too many children are separated from a parent because of the UK's spouse and partner migration rules, which are some of the harshest in the world. This causes children great distress, separation anxiety, depression, and loneliness. Some don't even know when they'll see their parent again. This cruel and uncertain time can have a lifelong impact. Separation from a parent during childhood has consistently been proven to impact social and psychological development. Despite this, the current rules are still creating a legacy of trauma within our young people today. No child should be put through this.
Hey everyone. Memories that I have with my dad make me happy but sad. Memories like when we were in another country and we had to go back to England here. It was hard because me, my sibling and my mum were crying. So we were missing him and we were only like 10 metres away, just leaving. I think at that time, the situation with our family made everything else that went wrong in my life feel 10 times worse. So it's stressful. It was quite a big effect on the mental health. Those are just two quotes from children on the impact of spouse and partner migration rules on their family and their own mental well-being. My name is Mia Johnson-Hall and I'm a researcher working for Coram, the UK's first and longest running children's charity. Since November last year, Coram has been speaking to children living in families affected by the spouse and partner migration rules as part of a 3-year research project carried out by Reunite Families UK. For children, these rules mean not being able to live in the UK with one or both of their parents. In some cases, this was for most of the child's life or for as long as they could remember. This is because the rules impose a minimum income that parents need to earn before their partner can live with the family in the UK. During these periods of separation, one parent has to look after the children without the support of their partner, all while working enough to earn above this minimum amount and save up for visa fees. These stresses and extra costs mean that the children I spoke to had minimal contact or visits with their parent during the periods of separation. We also heard from British children living abroad because they couldn't reside in the UK with both parents. Despite each family's unique circumstances, common themes were identified from talking with these children: their feelings of anxiety, sadness, and uncertainty. So we spoke to 9 children between 7 and 16 years old, with most being under 11. Some found their family situation very hard to talk about. Children told us about living in single parent families or with extended family members due to spouse and partner migration rules. Many parents had to earn long hours and spend less time with their child to meet the minimum income requirement to save up for visa fees or to visit the parent in another country. Children were very aware of the toll that these rules had on their parents. Some did not want to share how they were feeling with their parents because they didn't want to cause them extra stress. As one child told us, "I never saw my mum throughout the whole day when I came home after school. She also didn't get paid that much or not well enough to go to places to see my dad." Children spoke about how difficult it was not knowing when they would next see their parent or parents. Some still managed to have a close relationship with a non-resident parent. They missed their parent a lot and worried that they were lonely. These children struggled with feelings of loss and sadness. Others spoke of how separation from one parent and limited contact had strained their relationship, which led them to feel frustrated, confused, or upset. Many children were only able to have phone contact with their parent because holidays and visits were expensive. Children who were able to see their parents talked about how being separated again was a particularly difficult time. One child told us, "I was happy when Dad was here, but I knew he'd have to go back eventually. So that made me quite upset quite often. And then when he eventually did go, it made me really upset." Children also spoke about the impact of these rules on their mental health and well-being. They told us that the impacts of these rules caused them worry, stress, uncertainty, and anxiety. Children reported worrying about the safety and well-being of a parent who could not live with them. Children also worried that the parent and carer who had to look after them and their siblings without the support of their partner. One child told us, "My dad struggles with his emotions as well. When me and my brother are here, we're good distractions, but he's going to be here all alone by himself, which is scary for me." Children reported physical symptoms of anxiety, such as stomach aches, sleep disturbances, as well as selective mutism and being unable to focus at school. As one child told us, "Sometimes when I'm at school, I just think about how dad's not going to be there to pick me up or anything, and I'm not going to be able to see him for a long time." Children spoke about feelings of sadness, guilt, and loneliness due to the stress and separation caused by the minimum income requirement. Often, feelings of loneliness came from missing the parent who could not live with them, but was exacerbated by the resident parent having to work long hours to meet the minimum income requirement. Children felt very aware of the extra financial strain on their family. Often, this meant living in single-parent families with parents working long hours, going without things, and not being able to visit the country that their parents lived in or where they'd grown up. Some children reported trying to earn money themselves to help with visa costs. One child told us, "I feel stressed out and worry about my dad because he works so much to meet up with his financial obligations to me and the rest of the family." Another child told us, "My friends around me had all these things, and then I was the only one that didn't have anything. And that was all due to the fact that my mum was trying to save up to see my dad." Children also told us about how having a stressful family situation could affect school and making friends. Often, children had to move schools multiple times or had a parent leave or arrive just before an important time at school, such as exams. Some felt the disruption had affected their academic performance. One child told us, "My dad left like a week before a school test, so it was really stressful, and I wasn't able to achieve as much as I could have. Some of these tests, I'll often just sit down and cry because I can't do this, it's so overwhelming." Children told us about how growing up in a family affected by spouse and partner visa rules impacted on their sense of culture and identity. The financial impacts of the minimum income requirement often mean that children or parents were moving to countries that they had not been able to visit many times, if at all. This seems to have resulted in some parents or children feeling less familiar with the language and culture of the UK. For others, limited visits led to feeling distant from the country or culture that they were born in. From interviews, it seems that family separation may have impeded some resident children in the UK helping their parents to learn or adapt to UK culture, or impeded children knowing about aspects of their own identity. Today, I have shared what children told me about the potential harmful impacts of the spouse and partner migration rules. I want to finish by saying moving is a stressful time for any child, but moving without one or both of your parents, enduring extended periods of separation with little to no contact, and combining this with intense awareness of financial pressures at such a young age and heightened parental stress is all particularly hard to cope with. This is the specific situation created by the minimum income requirement for many of the children that I spoke to. It's also important to note that the children I spoke to were living in families affected by the former minimum income threshold of £18,600, which has since been raised to £29,000. It is likely children living in these families affected by this new higher income requirement could face even more significant impacts on their mental well-being. Given the formative age of the children we spoke to, many impacts on their well-being may have additional negative consequences in the future. The personal cost to these children and families are great. At the same time, the cost to children's mental health services in the UK are ever increasing, and for the children I spoke to, these rules could have increased the burden on our mental health services unnecessarily. No one benefits from children being separated from their parents. Thank you for your time and attention today. Please keep these challenges these children face in mind, and as the animation said, no child should be put through this.
Good afternoon, esteemed members of Parliament and fellow RF UK delegates. I am here with my own story, which illustrates just how punishing spouse visa process can be. After numerous life-threatening situations in Brazil, including a carjacking with a gun being pointed at my head, my husband and I knew we couldn't raise our children there. So we made the difficult decision that I would come back first, and then my husband and stepdaughter would join us once we were established. Little did we know at that time that I'd have to sponsor them by earning a salary of £22,400, as Kayani was not my biological daughter. I was teaching English to speakers of other languages, a career built upon a master's in teaching English to speakers of other languages and applied linguistics, plus 12 years of teaching experience. A career that can earn you in excess of 30k per annum, but only for the seasonal 3 or 4 school summer months here in the UK. A career that didn't even qualify me to become a teaching assistant in the state education system, earning in the region of £17,000 at the time. I did, however, find employment that was due to meet my MIR in a private language college, earning £18.50 per hour, teaching 25 contact hours per week, giving me an annual salary of about 24k, providing I took no unpaid holiday or sick leave. Realistically, with lesson preparation and marking, that was a 50-hour week, whilst my 2- and 3-year-old sons were in full-time nursery from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m, which entailed exorbitant nursery fees. I hadn't known that alongside earning the minimum income requirement, we would need £8,411 to cover the costs of a successful application. Stalemate. Then COVID hit. COVID meant my employment went from furlough to redundancy, and as we were living with my elderly mother, focus soon switched to ensuring we didn't give her COVID, as she was very vulnerable. There have been significant other moments in my quest for the minimum income requirement. I attempted a franchise with the promise of greater returns than PAYE employment, but I chose a sector that was strongly hit by the cost of living crisis. The minimum income requirement rose to 29k, and twice I have been successful in securing a job to satisfy this new requirement. In October 2023, I gained subcontract employment for a high-end financial services businesses, earning £120 per day, the equivalent to £31,200 annually. Sadly for me, their business model changed, and I soon found myself earning £4 per visit, covering a large geographical territory on a 0 hours contract that didn't even compensate for travel time, only fuel expenses. In January 2024, I secured employment with Serco for a government contract, £19.95 per hour, 35 hours a week, 36.3k per annum. My contract was cancelled because I was given 48 hours notice to attend a 5-day residential training course being held a 6-hour commute from my address. I offered to attend other offices. I offered to attend virtually, but ultimately my lack of childcare needed at such ridiculous short notice resulted in my contract being cancelled. I have since waited 8 months for the DWP to agree to assist in funding a project management course. 8 months. I have tried and tried, yet here I am without a husband and our children without their father. Am I supposed to feel that I'm not worthy, that I'm insignificant, and that I'm a burden? Can you imagine the ensuing battle I have with my own mental health on a daily basis? And the guilt for needing to be in my own country, not just to help my ill mother, but because it's my homeland. Family, friends, even school-run acquaintances are shocked to learn that marriage nor parenthood are sufficient for a family to be together in a country one partner calls their own. It seems the moral compass of the general public is to expect that as a married couple or family, you have an automatic right to live in the UK. It's not just the MIR. The extortionate fees that go hand in hand are also causing huge pressure and sleepless nights. Almost 6 years have passed. And that means now that my stepdaughter can never join her younger brothers. She will soon be 18 and no longer qualify for a dependent visa. Our family will be divided forever. That's 6 years of enforced single parenting, 6 years of missing my husband, and 6 years of 2 young children suffering at the hands of our UK's immigration system. And suffer they do. There's 18 months between them, 18 vital months that made the difference between Jaime, who misses Daddy so much that I wonder if his heart will ever repair, compared to Emmanuel, who didn't even remember having his daddy present at all. Such conflicting emotions requiring tailored support from frazzled mum trying to deal with my own emotions and longing for my husband, but also our extended family and school support services. Both Jaime and Emmanuel now continually receive emotional support at school. Jaime's began 5 years ago when he started school due to the separation anxiety he displayed on a daily basis. It was ramped up last September after he had to say goodbye to Daddy again, who had been staying with us on a tourist visa. He was falling apart and crying, sobbing uncontrollably, sometimes screaming on a daily basis. And at that same time, my mum needed extra help too. The world is an unfair place to Jaime, and no one can tell him otherwise. At that time, school perceived he would benefit from a memory box, a shoebox, in which he could save his favourite words to share with Daddy whenever he saw him next. And also a place to treasure some photos of together time. The box sits on his desk at school, and he has regular access to it, either alone or to go through with a support teacher or to take a friend out of class to go through it with him. The other children who have these boxes are those whose parent has sadly died. But Jaime's dad isn't dead. He also has rainbow cards, which he can request from his teacher. He takes these to the rainbow room to let the support staff know that he is sad and needs extra help and time to process his feelings. More recently, he has started Lego therapy on a daily basis. Most frequently adopted for children with autism, it aims to help with social communication skills. What I am helplessly witnessing is my little 9-year-old boy whose sadness is now turning to anger. And yet all I can do is offer him all my love and promise him that I will continue trying to get Daddy back, which is why I stand here today. Emmanuel thought Daddy lived in the phone. Emmanuel's extra support started last year, also after Daddy had to go home. School have now referred him to an outside source of help. They are increasingly concerned why he bottles up his emotions and refuses to talk at all, and how this will affect him further on in his future. We wait. We've been patient enough. We need help. Your help. And now. You don't need more time. You need more will. And those who are suffering under this system, they can't afford to wait either. From my own experience, I'm telling you, the immigration system is not simply broken, it is punishing. It is not a process, it is an ordeal. It drains families of time, money, dignity, and in many cases, hope. It's a system that delays, not by accident, but by design. It demands everything and offers silence in return. And the longer it drags on, the more invisible people like my family become, until we are seen as only a case number and not human beings. And yet somehow the political response is not urgency, but hesitation. We have built a system that punishes people for daring to seek a better life together. No one wins in a system built to wear people down. Not the families waiting in limbo, not the country that loses its potential, and not the leaders who claim to serve justice while refusing to confront the cruelty in plain sight. Couples and families are selling their homes. Mothers like me are forced into single parenthood, going into debt for years on end, taking second and third jobs, not for a better life, just to be together. British children are growing up in broken homes, not because of divorce, but because the Home Office says their parents can't be together. How do you measure the damage of missing birthdays, school plays, scraped knees, bedtime stories? No family should willingly be put through this by their own government. I want to talk to you as parents, not politics, and ask you just for a moment, imagine if it were your own family who was forced to separate and you could not reach your partner or your children, missing those birthdays, special occasions, unable to be there in emergency situations and hold them. For us, we don't have to imagine. We live this every day. Thousands do. You wouldn't accept it for your family. Why do we have to? Just because we dared to fall in love with someone who isn't from here. Me and many thousands like me, along with Reunite Families UK, are asking you to do what is right. To protect love, and family values. To bring the common sense back. Please, stop using couples and families like mine as pawns in some political game where media narratives take precedence over doing what is right. We are tired of being collateral damage, and so are our children. Love is not a luxury. Family is not a privilege. And a child's right to both parents is not something that should depend on income. We are better than that as a country, aren't we?
Thank you all for coming today, and thank you to RF UK for inviting me to speak on behalf of all of those who, like me, find themselves exiled because of the minimum income requirements. I'm speaking today about my own lived experience, but I want to emphasise that my story is not unique. There are many others who find themselves in a very similar situation, and I want to speak on behalf of all of them today. So, my story. In 2007, after completing my primary teacher's training at Durham University, I decided to take a year to work abroad before settling down to a career in the UK. I found a job teaching English in a private school in Perugia, Italy, and off I went. But life had other plans. A few weeks after arriving, I met Matteo through a mutual friend. A year turned into 2 and then 3. And in 2010, Matteo and I got married. Since we both had good jobs in Italy and Matteo was working on renovating an old family property, we initially decided to stay in Italy with the intention of moving back to the UK when the time was right. We had our first child, Alba, in 2011, followed by Miriam in 2015, and Arthur in 2019. Our long-term goal had always been to move back to the Scottish borders, where I'm from, to be close to my family. And with 3 young children, it became clear that I wanted to be closer to my family for support, and so my children could grow up surrounded by their grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. After Brexit, we knew that Matteo would be subject to visa restrictions, but we hadn't fully realised just how complicated the process would be until we seriously started looking into moving in around 2021. The MIR at the time was already difficult for us to meet, as moving back to the UK and working whilst also caring for my 3 young children without the help of my husband seemed impossible. We realised that the only way for us to return to the UK together, avoiding separation, would be to use the savings route. For the next 2 years, we worked hard to save what we could, and we were very close to meeting the goal of £62,750 when the previous government announced the increase to MIR. Obviously, we were devastated when we realised we'd need to save over £25,000 more on top of what we had already managed to save, and potentially even more if the further increases went ahead. Months of anxiety and stress followed as we joined other RF UK members in campaigning against the increases, unsure of what the future would bring. When the new government announced that they would pause the increase pending a review, it brought a little bit of hope, but nonetheless left us in limbo, not knowing whether or not we would eventually be able to move. And that is where we are today. We continue to save, but cannot make any concrete plans for our future. The emotional impact on my family has been profound. My British children don't understand why they can't live in the UK like their cousins do, because their dad is Italian. Every time they visit, they don't want to leave. They want to stay in the country that they see as home, close to their grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. We have missed out on countless family occasions, birthdays, weddings, and as my parents get older, I am unable to be there for the more difficult moments. Most recently, I've been unable to be there for my dad as he undergoes treatment for cancer. I have been made to feel like my family would be a burden on the UK taxpayer, simply because I don't meet one particular criteria. I'm a qualified teacher. My husband is a software engineer, earning more than the current MIR. We work hard, we're financially secure, but it all counts for nothing. The only way that I can prove that we are somehow worthy enough to live in the UK is to separate our family, either leaving my children in Italy or bringing them with me without their dad to alone set up a new life, find a job, work, and care for my family without my husband being there. All of that for at least a year and probably more. We have seen the devastating impact on the children who are currently separated from one of their parents. And we have seen how hard it is, especially for mothers or primary caregivers, to meet the income requirement whilst also caring for children alone. The whole process would put an unnecessary emotional and financial strain on my family, who want nothing more than to simply be able to live in the UK, to be close to family, to contribute to our community, to build a life here. It feels like I'm being punished, first for falling in love with someone from outside of the UK, and second for being a mother. We all know there are systemic issues that make it difficult to maintain a career whilst caring for children. We know that a lack of suitable childcare often gets in the way of applying for certain jobs or training courses that would give us access to better opportunities. We know that this creates a wage gap, and yet this policy seems to ignore all of that. When I look at the policy, it seems very apparent that it's thought of from the perspective of a particular type of person, probably a man. Somebody already living and working in the UK who wants to bring a spouse to live with them. It talks about foreign spouses as our dependents. It ignores the fact that for many of us, mostly women, our husbands are the main earners, that we work together as a team to ensure our families are taken care of, that to separate us makes us more vulnerable, more unstable, more likely to be dependent on external support. It ignores the fact that many of us are not already living in the UK, that we are living in exile without a path towards returning that doesn't entail ripping apart our families. The MAC review has highlighted many of these issues, yet does not go far enough by recommending to scrap the MIR completely. For myself, as a teacher, earning £29,000 is not necessarily out of the question. But whether I work a job earning 29,000, 100,000 or minimum wage, I would still have the same issues of needing to separate my family for an unknown period of time. And in my view, any policy which requires separating a child from their parent cannot be justified and is not a policy that any of us should accept. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Matteo Besana. I'm the Advocacy and Campaigns Manager for Reunite Families UK. And it's possible to see that the Migration Advisory Committee conducted this review. This was the second time that he conducted an analysis on the financial requirement after the original one they conducted in 2011. The committee specifically said in their analysis that they were not involved when the previous government announced the increase in December 2023. And this review was different from the previous one, in a sense that the previous one was only looking at the UK not be like the people joining family member not being a burden on the state. What this review instead was a balance between the economic well-being and the right to family life, which as the MAC says, is much more, I guess, difficult to calculate because it's always going to be a balance, it's always going to be on political decision rather than like a specific number that the MAC can say. They also mentioned how their inquiry has been weighted in there by insufficient data. Next slide, please. Another important element in the MAC, which is the Migration Advisory Committee, is that they asked participants to the survey, around 9,000 people responding to their call for evidence, why people come to the UK. And as we heard here, it's also possible to see that many of the respondents talk about family ties, talk about employment, educational opportunity, healthcare, culture and language, and barriers to living together in another country. Next slide, yeah. So the key impacts, they highlighted specifically also from the forward, the impact on families. And they highlight how they can have a significant impact on the family life of British citizen or settled resident and their children. The most negative impact, as we have seen and we know from our experience, is from people who did not qualify or were separated for a long period before qualifying, specifically children. They specifically mentioned children, and like Coram talked about, the evidence of mental health problems among children, the difficulty in establishing meaningful parental relationship, and feeling of rejection. In terms of the MAC recommendation, as we said before, it's always going to be a political decision. They talk about their calculation between 21 to 28,000, with most of their recommendation around the 23 to 25 mark. which is a level that most British workers in full-time minimum wage job will meet. The impact on net migration is expected to be very small, around 1 to 3%. And also they don't recommend, like the previous government did, of setting it based on the skilled worker threshold, because as we were saying, like throughout the increase, there was no relation between the family route and the skilled worker threshold. And then finally, that the minimum income requirement is a very blunt instrument. And so you might be able to reduce the number, not necessarily deciding what family members or what migrants you want to include in the, like, for them to come into the country. So in terms of the recommendation, we're going to look at Reunite Families UK recommendation. They recommend keeping the threshold uniform, so without regional variation between various areas of the country. But they suggest doing a calculation based on the UK data from the UK, excluding London, because they will skew the data, will increase massively the wage level. They don't recommend an additional amount for families, because even if in terms of public expenditure would be higher, the impacts on family life, which as we've seen, would be particularly significant for children. And they also recommend trying for the Home Office to minimize as much as possible children separation. And we thought that the recommendation of looking at the parent group in particularly interesting, because being for the Home Office, it might be a route that might be able to expand so that no children are living in the UK without their parents. In terms of our recommendation, a lot of cases were closely match what the mark found, in the sense of we think that there should be no MIR, because we think it's not fair to separate couples and family, and also they need to institute like a statutory right for British citizens or settled residents to bring their close family members to the UK. The MIR must be maintained, should be proportional to full-time national minimum wage, with arrangement for carers, part-time workers, and other groups. Also introduce a separate route for families with children, and we saw the mark suggesting basically the same thing, specifically looking at the parents. We also suggest like technical details on how we can improve the rules. So we can improve the rules, simplify the system, reform the exceptional circumstances rule, because again, a lot of people even in fear they are exceptional because they shouldn't be separated from their children. We saw they are still separated. So clearly the rule is so exceptional, so difficult that people are not able to access it. So it's very difficult to know what is considered exceptional by the Home Office. Simplify the application process, and the fee waiver also simplify. And this is kind of our request. So we think it's important for each member of Parliament to try to write to the Home Secretary to consider carefully the conclusion of the Migration Advisory Committee in the interim, while they consider like a full review or reform of the family migration to reduce the minimum income requirement to the minimum wage level, so that more people and more couples and family can reunite. Fix the level of application fees at the cost of processing, and cap every route to settlement of 5 years, and introduce a fee waiver for indefinite leave to remain. This is the kind of evidence which I think the Home Secretary said she wanted to receive from society and from committees like the Migration Advisory Committee to inform her policy decision. And so we hope that she will listen to it and make a system better for everyone. Yeah, thank you so much.
I have to say, as a co-founder and exec director of Reunite Families UK, I am floored by the input of everybody, the families, the couples that have shared their experiences with us, that have trusted us to speak for them. We're here for them, and we just implore the government to listen to common sense, to listen to the real life impacts that have been taking place, not recently, but for years, and the damage that's been done as a result. Just to say now, thank you so much to everybody for coming along and giving us your time. Thank you to everybody who is watching this at home. We will be sending out this recording to every single person who possibly can, because I tell you this, I am not stopping in neither of the team, and neither our community. I've been going on this since 2017, and I am more motivated now than ever. And this year is the year, and we really must be listened to. And just to say thank you so much to everybody who's been involved. And special thanks to Coram, special thanks to Paul Hanlon Foundation who made this work possible. And thank you all for coming and listening.